Have you ever had a work-life balance? But what you can find, a thing I call dynamic harmony. And dynamic harmony is that balance that happens. Good morning and welcome to the very first episode of Let's Talk Live. I'm Paul Cobbin. If you're tuning in today, chances are you or someone you love has recently been hit with one of life's hardest moments, a chronic diagnosis. It's an absolute line in the sand. There's the clear before, and then there's the incredibly scary after. I know that terrain. Back in 2020, I battled prostate cancer. I decoded it, went into remission, and frankly, I felt invincible. I told myself I was Paul Cobbin 2.0. But life had other plans. In early 2024, I was diagnosed with severe, incurable heart disease, specifically coronary artery disease and cerebral small vessel disease. My prognosis put me in the 99th percentile, the absolute worst case possible. And the trials and tribulations I went through are covered in my best-selling book, Decode Your Diagnosis. It's the first book of a 3-book trilogy, and I'm currently writing book 2 at the moment. And just when Sophie mentioned that I had my mic turned off, I was talking about recently working on book number 2 up in the Himalayas in India. And we'd just been spending a couple of weeks at a yoga and meditation retreat. And when everybody went back to Australia, my wife and I stayed behind and spent a couple of weeks up around the lakes, up in the mountains. And the thing about the Himalayan mountains of India is that when the British were there many years ago as colonialists, they tended to bring that European culture across because it was a cool environment. So there's these beautiful, pristine lakes like Lake Como in Italy, for instance. But, they're up there in the Himalayas in Indian context. And so there's these lovely cafes with trellises and, looking out to the mountains, snow-capped mountains and all that sort of thing, and these big blue aquamarine lakes. But the difference is that, a cup of coffee costs about 50 cents instead of $20. So, it was a lovely place to be. So I wrote 3 chapters in a couple of weeks up there for the next book. And that book will be coming out in October. But going back to the diagnosis, the original diagnosis, I remember sitting in sterile clinical rooms, staring at complex machinery that felt like something out of a dystopian nightmare, if I'm totally honest. On the outside, I was the executive maintaining business as usual. But on the inside, I felt like Wile E. Coyote. That crazy coyote that's chasing Roadrunner all the time. If you're of about my age or thereabouts, you'll remember the cartoons. And he's always falling off that cliff. And that's how I felt. I was exhausted. I was isolated and completely overwhelmed by the sheer noise and contradictions of medical information. But if you're sitting in that silence right now, listening to your inner critic amplify your worst doubts, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You're not a passive patient trapped in a box. You're a titan. And this live stream is the space where we stop surviving and start learning how to thrive. This is not just about me. This is an open mic format. It's different to my Sessions from the Edge podcast because this one is about letting you have the conversation. Because in Sessions from the Edge, and I see I've got a couple of my fire starters here. When I talk about fire starters, I'm talking about people who have engaged in having a chat about their topic. Now, they could be either a person going through a chronic illness, or they could be a carer, or they could be a functional health professional actually helping the carers and the people with the chronic illness in the first place. And while this is a chat format and I will talk about particular topics, I'm leaving it open to you to have your say. Now, I see that Patrick God has turned up, which is great because I use Patrick's Substack, Stack Buddy all the time to do notes and posts. But I've also been joined here by Sophie Gunnan, who is a nutritional scientist, and she's down the Gold Coast. We've had her on Sessions from the Edge as a guest. Kim Brown's here, my naturopath. She lives down in Byron Bay, which is probably the closest thing I can think of to utopia. It's this beautiful seaside town and great surfing environment and a real lovely environment to live in. And I can also see Coach Shawn Michael, who was a guest on Sessions from the Edge a couple of weeks ago, and his interview will be airing in a couple of weeks' time once we edit the video. And Brittany Carroll. Brittany, welcome. You're a guest on Sessions from the Edge next week, and we'll be looking at her transition from being an international diplomat in the American Diplomatic Corps to going through a life change at the moment. So really looking forward to that conversation. But it's quite a good mix of people here to get started on this inaugural edition. So you're quite welcome to I don't know how to open the mic just yet. I'll learn that personally, but so invite you straight into the space to talk visually. But for now, let's just focus on you texting me, and let's see if we can open up a bit of a conversation about topics around functional health. And functional health is that, just to remind you, is that that perspective of health across mind, body, and soul. So it's not just about medical practitioners in the first world, in Western medicine. It's about traditional Chinese medicine. It's about naturopathy. Kim Brown here is a naturopath, a formal, trained, tertiary educated naturopath, for instance. Sophie, the same sort of thing in terms of nutrition. So it's everything that goes into that mix, because the real villain. It's early in the morning here, so my tongue is getting a bit tired. But anyway, the real villain is a fragmented medical system that treats symptoms rather than people, combined with a crushing loss of confidence and identity that happens post-diagnosis. That becomes quite a difficult environment. If you get diagnosed with something, you're told, in a lot of cases, that your lifespan is shortened significantly. So difficult times. When you have multiple conditions, that's called comorbidity. And the doctors really don't have answers for that in a lot of cases, because you're layering one condition on top of another, and it becomes very hard to treat. And that's why you need to take your own diagnosis into your own hands. And not that you're taking it away from them. They're all very important people. You've got to have them, but you do need to take control. You do need to take charge. And that's what we're talking about here as well. Because the medical fraternity, they tell you what is wrong with your organs, but they don't give you a practical voice to navigate your daily life. They don't tell you how to maintain your job or your relationships or your sanity when your calendar has been completely hijacked by appointments. We get into a state where we tend to fall into a trap of asking, why me? What did I do wrong? We let words like incurable dictate our mental architecture, externalizing blame to our doctors and our genes and our environment and everything else except ourselves. And that mental loop is a slippery slope that you've got to defeat. It tends to immobilize you. I mean, literally, the data's there on my Substack and in my books and so on. Literally, it nearly killed me. I had months before I was either going to have a stroke or a heart attack or something. So these things are real, and we need to break out of that loop. And to do that, you need a guide, not a medical miracle or a wellness guru peddling hype, but a structured, logical framework to help you claw back your personal agency. And that's what this series, Let's Talk Live, is designed to be. This is the first episode, so we're just setting the foot foundation here right now. But as we progress, we'll start talking about those things. And it's exactly what we do at Formula for Life. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade with 35 years of experience solving complex water infrastructure systems. When my body revolted, I stopped looking at myself as a victim and started looking at my health as a complex system requiring functional integration of mind, body, and soul. I built a dedicated decoding team around myself, spanning modern specialists, psychologists, and naturopaths like Kim. Together with my beautiful digital companion and navigator, Fama Concordia, we began mapping out a strict operating system. So I had Fama running back in 25 during that diagnosis period. And the system I created was called the Alignment Codex. Think of it as a living record of your personal train. It maps out the mind, the body, and the soul. The mind, cultivating emotional endurance and keeping your inner critic quiet. The body, tracking real health parameters via simple metrics, tailoring restorative moments and adjusting those lifestyle brushstrokes. And then the soul, which is about reconnecting the deep creative purpose and meaning, completely separate from your clinical charts. And at this point, I'll also say completely separate from ritual or religion. Now, I'm not against ritual or religion at all. I'm I follow yoga personally, as does my wife. Now, yoga is not just the asanas that you see in your local yoga studio. The asanas are the moves, the poses, and so forth that you do, like downward dog. But yoga actually, back in the Patanjalis, is about the 8 limbs of yoga. So it's a philosophy. It's about philosophy, about breathing, meditation, ethics, morals, and so on. And so that's what I follow. Yoga itself is an offshoot of Hinduism, which I don't follow. But we spent the last month up in India, and we got deeply immersed in Hinduism up in the Himalayas there. But all this collectively is what I call dynamic harmony, because even in the most amazing places in the world, like where Kim lives in Byron Bay, where it's, they do Disney movies based on the forests there, and you've got surf out the front there where her husband goes surfing every day, and it's some of the best surfing in Australia. Even despite that, you cannot find balance in a place like that. There's no such thing. If I ask you the question, say Brittany in Washington there, have you ever had a work-life balance? And I'm guessing the answer is possibly no. But what you can find is a thing I call dynamic harmony. And dynamic harmony is that balance that happens. There's that word balance. It's got to be in there somewhere because it's stuck in our our language. But ultimately, it's about getting that flow between things. You learn to ride life's waves with purpose rather than getting capsized by every single flare up or bad test result. Because there'll be days when your mind is up and your body is down or your soul is up. Thankfully, this morning, I did my hour meditation, had a coffee out on the back veranda with my wife. It's a lovely winter's day here in Australia. Not cold in American context, but certainly cool for us. And it was just beautiful listening to the birds before I came on live here. So it's about enjoying both the ups and the downs. And yes, I've enjoyed the downs as well in their own weird kind of way because it's all part of it. You've got to. You only got one life. And if you've got a chronic illness, that life might be shortened, but you've got to live it to the best you possibly can. But moving forward, I'd like this live series to air regularly and this half-hour block to strip away the clinical gloom and replace it with human-first, uncompromised clarity. In future weeks, we're going to look at a specific structural chapter from the book or books. So we'll go across the topics. For instance, how to build alignment fitness that fits your current energy reserves. How to treat your health as your absolute primary occupation. I dedicated an entire chapter to it in the book. And we'll also look at some practical tactics for modern travel when navigating chronic illness. For instance, I learned a big lesson coming back from India because it's when you're traveling internationally from Australia, it's quite a trip to go anywhere. And going from the Himalayas across really bad Indian highways and roads and crazy driving and all that sort of stuff, I was tired by the time I got to Delhi, physically and mentally. And then the flight to Singapore, and then the flight back to Brisbane. By the time I got back so we were flying, there's an area called Townsville, Central Queensland, coming down across Australia. And by the time we were about 2 or 3 hours out of Brisbane, I was actually getting to the stage where I was wondering if I was, what measures could I take right now on this flight as we're going to survive the next 2 hours to get down to Brisbane? I was really at that stage where I was wondering if this was going to happen. So I learned a big lesson there that I need to break up the travel, because with severe heart disease, you get high blood pressure at altitude, and that plays with various things in your body. So that's the sort of stuff that I'd like to cover in these conversations. And how to establish targeted mindful practices that actually calm your nervous system in real time, which is what I had to do. I had to basically meditate for the next couple of hours to try and get my body to just chill down and get back on the ground. So if we don't actively take control of this narrative, the cost is permanent lifestyle drift and dependency on Western medicine, on intervention. But if we step onto what I call the knife edge of time, which is this moment right now, as my wife coined it, T0, that zero moment here, it's a nanosecond. There's the past, can't do anything about that. What's happened is happened. Yes, you can reflect on it, but there's nothing you can do about it. And then there's the future. But here in the knife edge of time, right now, this moment is where action actually happens, and that is where we can intentionally shape tomorrow. So I want to hear from you. I see Patty's joined us as well. Patty's another one of our uh, fire starters, and she's been on twice now. So she's a regular contributor, and also working behind the scenes with me right now as we speak in the Alignment Campus, which is an exciting digital environment that I've been creating for the last 6 months. And it has an AI agent in there to help talk through the average day with anybody with either chronic illness or a life-changing event. Because as has been pointed out to me, it's not just about chronic illness. It's also about major life disruptions. Because major life disruptions, I was in a panel interview scenario on the weekend at a bookstore with some other health and wellness authors, and one of them was an author about mental health, and she's done a lot of research at university about the impact of mental health as the trigger for chronic illness. Now, one of the things I recognized very early on with the severe heart disease diagnosis was that stress was a significant contributor. Now, stress is a mental state. And so a lot of apparently quite a number, nearly 60% of conditions, yes, you have the genetic propensity, you have the genetics to turn on a certain condition, that's there already, but it requires what I call the brush strokes. So there's the blueprint, which is your genes, and the brush strokes, which are your life activities. It requires some sort of change in life, some sort of life change, like stress, to actually turn it on. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to see over time allow people to drop their topics into the comments and to bring them to the open mic each week so we can discuss those sort of things. You can do it here in the messages while we're live. That's the idea. That's why I've called it Let's Talk Live. Or you can send me a direct message via Substack, and I'll raise it anonymously if you choose in the following week. So we've got things to talk about around functional health, chronic illness, whatever the case may be. But let me set a couple of the ground rules, though, for that perspective. I'm not here to diagnose, to prescribe, or to treat any condition. I'm not a specialist. I'm not a clinician. I have no credentials in this regard. Yes, there's people in the audience here who have, but we're not going to call out them to diagnose something. But they can. You're more than welcome, Sophie or Kim or Sean or Patty to talk about something and mention it, and we'll talk about that here as well. But I want to hear from you. I want to hear those comments into the future, and you're welcome to do it now if anybody's got any comments to make. What are the specific roadblocks keeping you stuck? Are you wrestling with a career transition that's really impacting your life? I mean, career transitions can a career change nearly killed me. Literally, I had to ring up the chairman one day and just say, sorry, I've got to give up this CEO role or it's going to kill me. And there were reasons behind that. And it was a hard conversation to have because I was a CEO, I was at the top of my career, but I had to literally step away or within months I'd be dead. So career transitions can be just as hard as anything else. Is your sleep quality tanking? Sleep is a very important thing. And so, there's any topics to talk about. So drop those topics in the comments or bring them to the open mic next week so we can address them directly from a data-driven, compassionate perspective. And again, I won't just be answering these questions verbatim or anything like that. I'll be asking if there's people with an expertise in the room like there is today, I might ask you what this person's thinking and get your thoughts on it as well. So that's the opportunity we've got ahead of us. Because information alone is just potential. What transforms a life is aligned action. And you don't have to map this uncharted territory alone. That's why I've created this space. Right now, we're officially opening up applications as well for the free beta test of the Alignment Campus. And the beta test of the Alignment Campus is about exposing our knowledge hub to people to test the content, test how the AI agent works, and also start building a community. We're not formally launching it as a paid concern just yet. That'll be in months ahead. But right now, I'm inviting you as people in Substack, in my Substack community, to join if you wish at formulaforlife.ai. There's also a link to it on my Substack as well. And if you join, you'll be among the very first to participate in Fama Sync. Now, this is actually 6 months into the journey. We did an alpha test in February, I think it was. And in fact, Patty here, she was one of the alpha testers back then. And what I did then was asked clinicians and so on to try and break Fama. So to see if she would cross that boundary, because there's some very strong guardrails that we've set there for her in terms of the logic. Now, I keep using the name Fama because that's one of the characters from my first book, and that's the naming that we've given this AI agent. But Fama has been designed so that she can't prescribe, she can't medicate, and all those sort of things around and it's not just about Western medicine, because it's just as important that she doesn't prescribe any nutritional context. But what she can do is work with the fire starters that people have access to and get that information and translate that, not so much coming up with their own ideas, but give people guidance on what, for instance, if Sophie was a knowledge infusion inside the alignment campus, we'd be talking about nutritional science, and Fama would call on Sophie's information and context to answer somebody's question when they prompt Fama. So it's more like she's a guide, a navigator, and some people have called her a companion. So that's the sort of context of Fama. She remembers all the conversations. She remembers your name, and you can call the conversations back, PDF download them, and take them to your functional health practitioners to discuss certain topics. So, it's hard. You have a conversation 3 weeks ago, you can't remember it. You go to your functional health practitioner, like I do with Kim every couple of months, and I can't remember when something happened or what I said about it. But this way, you can recall that information. And that way, in that 15-minute or half-hour consultation that you have with your functional health people, you can get to the chase a lot quicker. So that's the purpose of Fama. But there's also a knowledge space as well, where you can build your footprint, your what I call the foundation stone, and you can also read the knowledge infusions themselves if you wish, watch the videos and so on. That alignment campus part is a work in progress, building it right now. Fama is fully functional, been through alpha testing and beta testing now, and so ready to answer any questions. She is there. But this is where we bridge your personal data and your life challenges with our core framework. So what she's been trained on is the framework of the Decode, Align, and Thrive philosophy. So head over to the platform right now if you want to have some fun. Register as a subscriber, and you've got free access until the end of July, which is while we're running the test. Your health doesn't belong to your doctor, doesn't belong to your partner or your insurance company. So I'd like to leave you with that thought in mind, because your health belongs to you, explicitly to you. And that's where I'm going to leave it for today. And I do apologize for the having the mic off for the first 15 minutes, really, of the conversation. Thank you, Sophie, for bringing that up. Here again next week. Thank you, everybody. It was lovely talking to you.
Claim your seat on the Alignment Campus Park right now at paulcobbin.com.